Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into a single moment in history, a blistering autumn day in 1086. It's a day that's often, downplayed in the grand story of Spain. But it fundamentally saved Muslim rule there for, what, another 4 centuries? We're talking about the Battle of Zallaqa.
That's right. And for you, the listener, this deep dive is really a shortcut to understanding this huge turning point. We've pulled from sources that show this incredible study in contrasts
Contrast how?
between leadership styles, military strategy, and the difference between discipline forged by, say, scarcity versus an arrogance that's born of immense wealth.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1086. We're in al-Andalus, Muslim Spain. And when you think of al-Andalus, you usually picture the glorious cities, right? Cordoba, Granada.
Seville,
Uh,
like culture, science, poetry, all of that.
Hmm.
But by this point, politically, it was a mess.
A beautiful wreck, is that fair to say?
That's a great way to put it. The once mighty Umayyad Caliphate had completely collapsed. It had fractured into maybe 24 weak little petty kingdoms.
The Taifas.
The typhus. And these rulers, they spent more time, squabbling with each other and funding poets than they did maintaining a real army.
And that division was the exact vulnerability that the rising Christian powers in Europe were exploiting.
Exactly.
I
The
know.
sources show the pressure was just tightening and tightening, mostly driven by Alfonso VI of Castile, who had actually crowned himself Imperator Totius Hispaniae,
Emperor of all Spain.
Emperor of all Spain. And he wasn't just hungry for glory. He was, financially sustained by the taifa's weakness.
Through the tribute payments, the parias.
Yes, the parias. Massive amounts of gold and silver. You can think of them as golden handcuffs, really.
Golden handcuffs, I like that.
The Taika rulers paid him because they were too weak to fight him, and he used that very wealth to build an even stronger army to eventually conquer them.
It's the ultimate parasitic relationship. And then the moment that changes everything.
The fall of Toledo, 1085.
And Toledo wasn't just any city.
No, it was the ancient Visigothic capital, the symbolic heart of Spain. And when it fell, the psychological blow across al-Andalus was just crushing.
The sources describe mass panic.
Total panic. The assumption was that the entire peninsula was lost. It was just a matter of time.
To these Taifa rulers, these rivals who, hated each other, they finally have to swallow their pride.
They do. They make a desperate call across the Strait of Gibraltar. They realize those golden handcuffs are finally choking them.
And who do they call?
Their cry for help went to Yusuf bin Tashfin, a Berber commander who controlled this powerful, religiously austere movement in North Africa called the Almoravids. He answered the call, and Zallaqa became the inevitable showdown.
So it's Berber discipline against Castilian arrogance.
That's the core of it. This is the story of how an army with really nothing but desert grit and piety broke the myth of Christian invincibility.
And saved Muslim Spain for centuries.
Let's start with the Christian side then. In the build-up to Zallaqa, the sources all highlight one thing about Alfonso VI's hubris.
Total arrogance. By 1086, his confidence was just stratospheric.
He wasn't subtle about it at all. Like you said, Imperator Totius Hispaniae. That title wasn't just for show.
It was an economic statement.
Exactly. It was a declaration that the Taifa kingdoms were basically just his gold mines waiting to be fully annexed.
And this financial power, it blinded him strategically, didn't it?
It did. His arrogance wasn't just personal. It was systemic. It was fueled by that constant flow of gold. So when he heard that Yusuf bin Tashfin had crossed the strait with his North African forces,
He just laughed it off?
he did. The chroniclers recorded this dismissive sneer. He famously compared the Berbers to nothing but locusts.
Locusts.
Locusts. So they'd be swept back into the sea as soon as they tasted the steel of his Castilian knights. He saw them as a pest, not a real army.
Wow. Meanwhile, the Taifa kings are wrestling with this impossible existential choice.
Keep paying the tribute, which is just delaying the inevitable, or invite this harsh, disciplined, ascetic North African ruler onto their land.
Knowing he might just decide to stay.
Right. It was choosing the lesser of two evils. And the sources capture this perfectly in that famous quote from al-Mu'tamid ibn Abbad, the Emir of Seville.
What did he say?
He declared, "Better to be a camel herder under Yusuf than a swineherd under Alfonso."
That one line just cuts through all of it.
It does.
He's saying, I would rather submit to a fellow Muslim, even if it means a life of stark poverty, than to a Christian king who will destroy my identity, my religion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They were trading potential conquest for for certain internal reform
Yeah.
under a figure who clearly put faith and survival above the kind of luxury they valued.
It was a choice rooted in religious solidarity, despite the huge political risk.
Huge risk.
Here's where it gets really interesting then. Comparing the two commanders, you've got Alfonso, probably decked out in white, surrounded by gold and silver, expecting a quick victory.
And then you have Yusuf bin Tashfin,
Yeah.
who is the sharpest possible contrast.
A man from the desert.
A man shaped by the harshest environment you can imagine. The Sanhaja Berbers of the Sahara. His world was. It was scarcity, survival, and a very profound, very literal interpretation of his faith. And that background gave him a kind of discipline that none of the palace-raised rulers, not the Taifas, not Alfonso, could ever really understand.
And how did that leadership style actually, manifest? How did he live?
It was absolute austerity. He was tall, lean, always wrapped in a simple, coarse wool garment. Never silk, never finery.
And his diet.
Barley bread and camel's milk. Slept on rough mats. The sources love recounting how he actively despised the luxury he saw in al-Andalus. When the Andalusian princes tried to give him gifts, precious robes, jewelry, he just immediately gave it all away to his soldiers.
Wow. So his piety wasn't just a political stance. It was the foundation of his command.
It was his armor. It was the source of his massive moral authority. His men followed him because he lived exactly as they did. This humility, it bound his army together more tightly than chains ever could.
But he wasn't reckless. The sources call him a reluctant general.
He was very cautious, deeply concerned about being accused of, invading other Muslim lands. He didn't just rush in.
Right.
He consulted jurists and scholars all across North Africa. He only agreed to march when the intervention was confirmed as a necessary jihad to save al-Andalus.
Every step was deliberate, and he rejected the traditional titles of a king.
Absolutely. He refused the title caliph, saying only the Abbasids in Baghdad could hold it. He styled himself simply as Emir al-Muslim.
The commander of the Muslims.
And this rejection of the crown, this deliberate humility, it gave him immense legitimacy. It was a subtle but profound political statement. I am not here to rule you in luxury, but to lead you in faith.
So all these forces, Castilian arrogance, Taifa desperation, and Almorav discipline, they all converge on this wide, dry plain, Zallaqa.
Also known as Sagrachas, near Badajoz. And the visual contrast on that field must have been astounding.
On Alfonso's side, you have maybe 50,000 men.
And the sources emphasize the heavy armor, the gleaming steel, the heavy war horses snorting like, and I'm quoting here, beasts of thunder.
This was the European standard: pride, weight, and shock.
Exactly. And facing them, Yusuf had a smaller force, maybe 20,000 to 25,000 men, a mix of his Almoravids and his reluctant Taifa allies.
And visually, they were completely different.
Starkly different. Lighter weapons, many in simple wool cloaks, some with the dark face veils of the desert Berbers. Their strength wasn't in weight, it was in cohesion.
In discipline.
In discipline. Yusuf knew that trying to stop that heavy Castilian charge head-on would be suicide, so he devised this brilliant three-tiered trap.
Okay, let's break that down, because this is where that desert thinking meets the European hammer. So tier one was the bait.
The first tier, the Andalusian forces. His most reluctant allies, he placed them right in the front to absorb the initial kinetic shock of that heavy cavalry charge.
He knew they would probably break.
He expected them to bend, maybe even break. But crucially, they had to slow the Castilians down. He was using his allies as a shock absorber.
A huge gamble.
A necessary one. The second tier was the disciplined corps, a strong, steady line of Almoravid and Berber troops. They were the anvil.
Fresh and ready.
Fresh and ready to meet the Castilians after they'd exhausted their first furious charge.
And the third tier, the hidden element.
That was the hammer. Yusuf's own elite reserve, held completely out of sight, waiting for that one precise moment.
When was that moment?
When Alfonso's entire army was stretched thin, deep inside the Muslim lines, focused only on what they thought was a victory right in front of them, and critically drained by the Spanish sun.
So the battle begins at dawn. Alfonso unleashes his knights.
He does. And the sources describe this terrifying spectacle. The knights just smash into the Andalusian front lines, exactly as Yusuf predicted.
And the line nearly breaks.
It falls back in disarray. Alfonso, seeing this, he pushes harder, he pushes deeper. He and his commanders, they think the day is already won.
And that's the fatal error.
That's his supreme confidence becoming a strategic blunder. He overextends his entire force, thinking he's just pursuing a route.
But the whole thing is a trapped closing.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating here is the role of the elements. It's midday now. The October sun is just blazing.
And those heavy armored Castilian knights are just
They're
cooking.
draining fast, that
Hmm.
gleaming iron armor that symbolized their pride. It's now a literal prison, trapping the heat, suffocating them. They're exhausted, they're overextended.
And that's when Yusuf hits them.
Suddenly, without warning, the black-clad Almoravid cavalry surges from the flanks and from the rear.
The hammer.
The hammer falls, and that hidden blow, at the moment of maximum Castilian exhaustion, it turns the tide instantly. The noise must have gone from battle chaos to just pure shrieking panic.
They're encircled. The heavy armor is a liability now.
Total liability.
Mhm.
They can't maneuver, they can't retreat. The collapse was total. Alfonso himself was badly wounded, barely escaped with a handful of guards.
In the field.
Became a slaughterhouse. So much so that the name Zallaqa literally means slippery ground
Because of the blood.
because of the blood.
He lost almost his entire army in a single afternoon. The psychological impact must have been immediate.
And devastating. Alfonso's reputation for invincibility shattered overnight. His expansion was just stopped dead for years. The myth that the Christian North was destined to consume the Muslim South, it just evaporated.
So after this incredible victory, the Taifa rulers, they want to crown Yusuf as their overlord.
They do. They recognize his genius, his piety. And here is the political move that just solidifies his moral authority.
He refuses the crown.
He refuses.
Why? I mean, why refuse that ultimate prize? Was it genuine humility or was it a tactical move?
The sources suggest it was a combination of both, which only made him more powerful. First, genuine piety. He saw himself as a servant of Allah, not a king chasing glory.
And second,
Suspicion of kingship itself. He linked crowns and titles to the very corruption and arrogance that had brought the Taifas to their knees in the first place.
so by refusing the crown and keeping that simple title, Amir al-Muslimin, he avoids all the political resentment.
Exactly. He maintains moral authority without becoming a political target. His refusal gave him leverage, not land.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Zallaqa proved that Iberian Muslims couldn't defend themselves without North African aid. It made them permanently dependent on the Almoravids for their own survival.
so when the Taifas inevitably fell back into their old ways, the infighting, the poetry contests,
Yusuf returned. By 1090, he deposed them one by one. But not as a conqueror seeking glory. He came back as a moral reformer enforcing justice and piety.
Zallaqa was the stepping stone.
It was a necessary stepping stone for the Almoravids to build this massive transcontinental empire. From the Sahara all the way into Spain, it hardened the entire conflict into a long-term civilizational struggle.
So looking back at all the sources we've analyzed, what are the crucial takeaways? What does Zallaqa really teach us?
I think we can summarize the core lessons. First, that unity and discipline matter more than numbers and wealth. Yusuf's smaller army won through cohesion and patience. Second, piety can be a genuine source of strength and leadership. Yusuf's simplicity gave him a moral authority that Alfonso's gold could never buy. And finally, arrogance is the ultimate strategic weakness. It brought ruin to Alfonso when his pride blinded him to the threat he was actually facing.
It's a powerful lesson, really, valuing principle over pomp.
It is. And this raises an important question that the sources highlight, one that's still relevant today.
Which is?
If history is so often written by the victors, what does it mean when a decisive victory like Zallaqa, a moment that demonstrably preserved a people's dignity and sovereignty for decades, is often downplayed by Western historians as just a mere delay of the Reconquista?
Or is just relatively unmarked in Spain today?
Right. It suggests that sometimes the most profound historical moments are the ones that disrupt the prevailing narrative.
And those disruptions are the first ones to be minimized or forgotten.
It reminds us that history isn't just in the records of the conquerors. It's in the critical choices of unity, wisdom, conviction that leaders make, especially when faced with overwhelming odds, and whether or not they choose to wear a crown. So you have to ask yourself, what narratives in your own world are being minimized because they just don't fit the expected story?